kind of an analogy of how we're looking at society right now. And for those that caught the Jason Kaliep episode, we touched on it very quickly, but it's essentially around the idea that, our society is kind of summarized by a wagon, and there's different components and different roles around this wagon. You got the wagon pullers. Those are the people up front, harnessed up, pulling it, getting it going in the right direction. Maybe there's some people walking alongside the wagon that aren't necessarily holding it back. They're not adding to the burden of the people up front, but they're not necessarily contributing. And then there are the people sitting up in the wagon, weighing it down. We would like to think that those would be reserved for children and the elderly and those, specific people that actually need that help. I think there's a list of kind of categories you could cover there. But unfortunately, what we're seeing today is a lot of people are getting up and sitting in that wagon that should be pulling. And, so we want to kind of try to deconstruct that a little bit and hopefully deconstruct why maybe that's happening, why a narrative that is being pushed in society is perhaps working so well, and what we can do to combat it. And for those that are up front pulling the wagon, kind of how you should be proud of that. And it's not always, in my opinion, the roles that you think. In my opinion, it's not always like, oh, the military people and the doctor, like people that kind of get a lot of credit. If you're a mom, you're a wagon puller. If you're the daycare worker, you're a wagon puller. If you're the guy working a construction site at night, digging a ditch on the side of the road, working long hours, like I consider you a wagon puller, man. Like you should be proud of that. It doesn't have to always be this prestigious CEO title or something like that. There's so many ways you can contribute to society, and yeah, so that's the gist of this conversation. But Tone, what do you think, man?
Yeah, I think it's it's interesting because on the surface that the wagon puller analogy might seem simple, like, oh, either you're pulling or you're in the wagon, and as you just described, it actually is a pretty complex example of a way I think a healthy society could operate, or what I think we are seeing nowadays of like maybe a society that has started to get a little bit sick. And of course, that's like an exaggerative statement just to make a point. But as you mentioned, like there is a time and a place and to be in the wagon, but it should be reserved, as you mentioned, for those who, hey, like maybe you have a sickness going on, or you're an elder, or you're a young child. In that instance, it makes sense for you to be in there. And that's a healthy society, is that there are going to be people that need taken care of. And there's going to be, as you said, like there's going to be nurses in the wagon as well, who are the ones actually taking care of them that are getting pulled. But their value add is to be in the wagon, helping them out. I think the interesting part, and I think what we want to dissect a little bit, is why are so many people willing to crawl into the wagon when they have no reason to be in there? They're not disenfranchised. They're not elderly. They're not a child. They're fully capable. But to me, feels like it's an easier short-term solution to realize, oh, I can crawl in here and not have to grind, not have to work, not have to contribute, and other people will kind of pull the wagon for me. But, and you and I were talking about before we went live, is that in the short term, that may feel like, oh, wow, like I gamed the system. Like, look at this, I can hop in here. But over time, that corrosion of the value of being a contributor to yourself and to your tribe not only has detriment to the individual, but then to us as a society. So that's the thing I would want to ask you is, why do you think now, and of course, I don't think this is just unique to our generation. This is something that's played out before, but it does seem more pertinent. Why do you think more and more people are willing to climb in there, when for individuals that I'm around, and even myself, my whole value as an individual and then as a contributor is surrendered around being of service to myself and to those around me, so that I feel like I'm contributing? Because in moments in my life where I felt like I wasn't doing that, that was the most lost I ever felt. So what's your why behind we may be seeing an uptick in individuals willing to do that?
Well, it's really freaking simple, man. I think two reasons. One, people are wired to take the easy route, right? That's just human nature. And I think a lot of these people that are willing to let others pull the weight for them, just don't have that kind of moral compass to, especially as men, you know what I mean? It's like, you're going to let another guy pull the weight for me. No, I'm an able-bodied male, and my job is to contribute, right? That's part of my responsibility to provide and protect and be a productive member of society. Unfortunately, man, just some people just don't possess that like internal voice of feeling like the obligation to do that. And number two is entitlement. And, it's like these people think, oh, I'm allowed to sit in the wagon because society tells me that I'm a victim. So, I don't have to pull. The other people can pull for me because poor me, look at my circumstance. And we saw this, man, in COVID, this entitlement. So ridiculous. We start pumping out government checks every month. Here's the thing. All right, you want to get a government check for $2,000 a month so you can sit in your house and freaking play video games and eat Cheetos like a piece of shit? Or do you want to go work a 9-to-5 honest living like everybody else and be a productive member of society? Unfortunately, in that scenario, more people than we'd like to admit are taking option A. And they're not sitting there like, oh man, like, they don't have that guilt. They love it. They're taking advantage of the system. They love being a freeloader. And then on top of that, during COVID, it's like this law that you can't get evicted by your landlord, right? So they're not even paying. They're getting free money from the government. They have no expenses, and they're not even paying their own rent. And they're wasting it on a bunch of dumb shit, which is why like the consumer goods market exploded. You know what I mean? Because everyone has this extra income. There's some places that are still fighting that, right? Where it's like it was like in a way well intended. Of course, COVID was an unprecedented thing. We were kind of figuring it out on the fly, so it was a way to like make it so there weren't massive economic repercussions. But of course, people are going to take advantage of every system. So to me, that's the most glaring example in recent history. You had grown-ass men, able-bodied, middle-aged men like us that are sitting on their ass in their apartment all day long doing nothing. And then when it comes to the end of the month to pay their rent, they don't even fucking pay their rent, right? Those are the people that we are going to have in our society. And the irony is those people are the ones that think they're the victims. And they're the ones that villainize the people that are up front, harnessed up, digging their feet in the ground, pulling the wagon, right? Like the people that are successful, the people that are contributing to society are become the villain. How ironic is that? It's like, hey, motherfucker, who do you think's paying your $2,000 subsidy, right?
For sure.
That's coming from tax dollars, right?
Yeah.
It's not coming from you. It's coming from people that are working a 9-to-5 and working their butt off. And that's not even just the super rich. That's the middle class too.
Yeah.
That's that guy working a construction job. He's the one paying for that dickhead that's sitting on his couch, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know, man. It's I think a lot of people do have that internal voice of like that. It just, you would never accept that because it's just not morally right? Like you're better than that, and you want to be a pull of the wagon. But unfortunately there's too many people. I think because of the narrative that's getting pushed down by the government to certain groups of people, they want them to feel like they're a victim, and they want them to think they're entitled to certain things. I hate to say it because that's how they get votes, right? If you think you're dependent on a certain political party, right, and you're the party of giving out all the free shit, well, how do you think you're going to vote? You know what I mean? And especially if you then subscribe to the narrative of, oh yeah, they're right, I should get $2,000 a month, or I should get all that welfare because I'm owed that because I'm in bad circumstances and the society owes this to me.
Yeah,
and it's just completely fucked.